Hello my friends, this is Amner Hunter from Amner Hunter Studios. Welcome to another video tutorial of audio mixing or mixing music. As you know, we're mixing this heavy power metal song from the band Dark Ride. And in all the past videos, we checked at the equalization topics. Okay, we applied EQ across the tracks of this song. With these EQ moves, we achieved the clarity. We achieved separation between the instruments. All of the elements are working better in a mix. They fit better. They sit better in the mix. So I highly recommend you to check out those videos. And right now we're going to move on to compression topics. All right, compression is a very important thing in music. Between equalization and compression, I think if you do those two things all right, you're pretty much 80% of your mix ready. Okay, so we're going to move to compression, but before we actually go and apply some compression to all of these tracks, we need to know what compression is, what are its purposes, and why compression was created. All right. So compression was created first on the early 1930s and 1940s, right, of last century. It was first created for TV stations and TV shows, right? Because they realized that sometimes the host of the show or TV or radio show, sometimes they were speaking at a louder volumes and then a quieter volumes, and then also in TV shows they noticed when all of the audience was screaming and everything, the volumes were really loud, right? So it was created compression to have a more consistent levels between all of the people that were talking or in the radio station, also to have a more even level of volume, so that they would be not much of a difference between the loudest parts and the quietest parts, right? And that was before. Another thing also that was created, it was because to protect all of the gear and equipment from overloading, all right, or from exploding because of the really high signal of audio. Because if the audio passed through a certain point, it could overload the gear, or it could make some really hard damage to the piece of equipment. All right, so these were the reasons that compression was created back in the day. And compression, I like to put it in the simplest way as this: a compressor is just an automatic volume control. Okay, back in the day, in music, as you know, music is very dynamic, right? We people, we humans, when we create or make music or play an instrument, it is very natural that it is very dynamic, right? Uh, Music has some louder parts and then quiet parts, and that's what makes music to feel alive, right? If we play drums, for example, not all the hits that we apply to the drums are in the same intensity. All right, some hits are louder and some hits are quieter, right? So this is natural, and compression was created to control dynamics. Okay, to control dynamic range, right? I'm going to show you this picture. We checked this topic also in a previous video, one of the first videos of this series. Dynamic range is simply the difference between the loudest parts of a signal and the softest part of a signal. Okay, that's what is called dynamic range. And with compression, we are trying to control this dynamic range. Okay, we're going to move to that on a second. Okay, and as I was telling you about, the compression is an automatic volume control. This is, for example, this is a snare track of the song that we're mixing, right? As you can see, here, some peaks, right? Some hits of the snare are louder than other ones. You see here, this is a little bit quieter, and then this louder, and then quieter, right? So back in the day in music, there was a person actually doing this. Like when if a vocalist was singing a song, and the vocalist sometimes get pumped by the song, and sometimes they scream very high volumes, and then they go quiet. So there was a person that was like moving the fader up and down in those parts, all right? Like when the singer sang really loud, well, this person had to bring down the fader, all right, so that it has a more consistent level. But it's very difficult for a person to do this and to guess all of the changes that the performance will do across the song. It is impossible for us to keep start manually moving up and down the fader and the levels, right? Uh, because this happens in a very fast way, and it's very impossible for us to know where all the parts are going to be, right? So with compression react to these changes in the dynamics, and we can control them. Okay, so all right, these are the snare that we have here. Okay, and for example, if we get close to this signal, this is the hit of a snare, right? Uh, the signal of audio is practically divided in two parts. Uh, the first the first part of the hit, where is the initial peak, it's called the transient, or the attack of a signal. And then there is this part of the signal, it's called the decay, right? Because it's decaying, or the body of a signal, right? So with compression, we can control and shape the sound of a certain source. All right, we can shape this sound, and we're going to move on in a minute. Okay, we have percussive elements are very rich in transients, right? It's very easy to see in percussive elements the transient, the decay, and everything. Uh, it's very different. For example, in electric guitars, right? For example, distorted guitars, we can see the dynamics here, right? We see peaks, and then it goes down, goes up. Uh, but it's not very much of a transient source, right? It doesn't have a lot of transients. It's more like a consistent signal. And so we're going to use this snare drum to explain what compression does. All right. So I'm going to open up here a compressor. I'm going to use the one that comes with Cubase in stock. All right. I'm going to put this with no compression at all. All right. Okay. So actually, compression to me is one of the most confusing topics in mixing. Is one of the also one of the hardest things to hear or to listen in a mix. You know, with equalization, you can listen pretty easy what the equalizer is doing, right, to the frequencies. When you cut or boost, it's very easy sometimes to notice what is happening with an equalizer. But with compression, it's kind of difficult to know what it's doing to the audio. Uh, and with time, with more practice, we start to educating our ears to realize when a signal is compressed, heavily compressed, or not compressed at all, right? So let's move to the compression to the, I'm sorry, to the compressor controls, all right? So we have to basically understand five controls of a compressor. And there are a lot of types of compressors, and some of them have different a lot of options, more than these five controls. But we need to understand these five controls that we're going to find in every compressor, so we can use it uh, for the well of song. All right. So first is the threshold. All right. The threshold is we're going to indicating to the compressor when it will start to act. Okay. So let's put this audio, and I have an input meter and an output meter right here. So there's no compression happening right now. So I'm going to put this audio right now. Okay. So as we see here, the input is the same amount as the output, right? And with compression, we can control the input and output too. And so we can make the output a little bit quieter than the input, right? So with threshold, for example, if we set the threshold to minus 10, I'm going to put here minus 10, it means that when the signal passes minus 10 decibels, it will be compressed, all right? Everything that is above minus 10 decibels will be compressed. And this is the threshold function. And how much will it be compressed is the task of the ratio, right? The ratio is the amount of compression that we're going to make, right? With a threshold of 1 to 1, it's not compression at all right? If we set the threshold to 2, the compression will start to happen, all right? Depending on the threshold, of course. And let me explain this with some pictures I have here. Okay. With the threshold of 2 to 1, it means that for every 2 decibels that the signal passes the threshold, only 1 decibel will be routed to the output stage. Okay, so a ratio of 2 to 1 could be seen as a fraction, as a mathematical fraction, like 1/2. All right, 2 to 1 is you could see it as 1/2. For example, for every decibel that the signal exceeds the threshold, only 1/2 will be routed to the output stage. Okay, let me put another way here. I'm going to put a 4. A ratio of 4 to 1, it means that for every 4 decibels that the signal exceeds the threshold, only 1 decibel will be to the output, okay, of the signal. So as you see there, we're compressing 3 decibels, or it could be seen this way, like a fraction. For every 1 decibel that the signal exceeds the threshold, uh, only 1/4, right? 1/4 of that level will be to the output, if that makes sense. And my advice would be to for you to not get lost on these numbers, on these fractions and mathematics. We are not on science or mathematics here. We're in music, so we don't have to be doing like mathematics on the compressor. That's not what we're looking for here. I'm just explaining what the ratio does. All right. So and also in compression, and as you know, in all of the audio world, there are no rules, right? There are no like this is the ratio that you have to put in on this instrument. You know, it depends on the source, of course, always. But as a rule of thumb, I like to begin compression with the ratio of 4:1. All right, I can move it down or up, but I usually start with the ratio of 4:1. So let's leave it like that. Okay, and let's put the snare drums here to see what this compression is doing to the audio signal. All right. Okay, so some peaks are being compressed, right? As you see, there's like 1 decibel of difference between the input and output, right? So we are compressing the signal a little bit. And let's move, if we move the threshold down, it will be compressed more. And we have a meter of gain reduction here. That's why it says GR. It's the amount of compression that we're doing. So let's move the threshold a little bit down. Okay, so this meter tells me that 1.6 decibels are being compressed, are being reduced of this signal, for example, right? And another thing to consider in the compressor controls are the attack and release. Okay, uh, the attack tells the compressor how fast the compressor will react, all right, to the signal, and this is measured in milliseconds. The attack and release, okay, are measured in milliseconds. And one thing I noticed in this compressor is this compressor is analyzing the RMS, which is the average loudness. I wanted to analyze the peaks, right? So I'm going to put it in this way. So let's check out. So there, the compressor is analyzing these peaks and is compressing with the analysis of these peaks, all right, instead of RMS, which is the average loudness. So we always want to analyze the peaks because we want to compress the transients, right? We want to compress a little bit the transients and to reduce them a little bit so we can have a more consistent level. So right now I set it up to the peak analysis, and as I was telling, with the attack, it's how fast the compressor will react to those peaks, all right? So if we set the attack too fast, like in this case is 1 millisecond, the compressor will immediately reduce the peaks, right? We will reduce all of the peaks. Okay, and I tend to use medium attacks like this, or maybe like this. I don't usually use really fast attacks because fast attack times tend to kill the audio, right? Because they don't let any transient pass through the compressor without being compressed. I mean, with compression, we are trying to control dynamics, not to kill dynamics, right? We are trying to reduce some peaks, reduce a little bit the peaks, not to cut the peaks, right? Because we still want to keep the dynamics in the music. It what makes music alive.